Drogue routing, main pin okay, reserve lanyard, reserve ripcord. Are you ready?
You bet.
Well, let's go skydive. Okay, let's load up.
Exciting, exhilarating, challenging. Skydiving is all this and more. Sharing this experience with the novice has previously required long hours of instruction in exits, free-fall body position, emergency procedures, and canopy control just to make that first jump. And during the most critical part of the jump, canopy deployment and its possible emergency situations, the student was all alone. Tandem jumping has changed the way we train students to skydive. After exiting the aircraft and gaining stability, the Tandem Master deploys a drogue to limit the freefall speed to normal terminal velocity. Now the student gets a realistic introduction to skydiving, and with the Tandem Master's help, dual instruction in freefall skills. Because of the drogue-stabilized speed, freefall photography is possible and can be used as an excellent instructional aid for a review of the jump later on the ground. At opening altitude, the Tandem Master releases the drogue, which now functions as a pilot chute, and deploys the main canopy. During this phase of the jump, the highly experienced Tandem Master is there to make any critical decisions and take the necessary action. Under the canopy, the instructor and student have the ultimate suspended harness to use in canopy control instruction. With the Tandem Master literally looking over his shoulder and helping when necessary, the student learns to turn and break the canopy. Using the ground references pointed out to him, the student learns to navigate the canopy toward the target for a comfortable, soft landing. Utilizing Tandem, a totally untrained person can experience all the facets of skydiving in less time, with less effort, and with a greater degree of safety than ever before. The equipment and procedures are state-of-the-art. The final responsibility for the success of every Tandem jump depends on the Tandem Master, you.
My name is Bill Booth. I'm president of the Uninsured Relative Workshop, manufacturer of the Tandem Vector system. We've produced this video to supplement written Tandem instructor training course with real-time demonstrations of important or critical material. The information in this video applies to both the initial certification process as well as the recurrent training that's required to maintain the Tandem instructor certificate. If you're new to tandem jumping and are training for initial certification, you will find the applicant qualifications listed on the front of the yellow Tandem training logbook. For initial certification, you will make 5 jumps under the direct supervision of a Tandem instructor examiner. Your first jump will be a solo jump, focusing entirely on the gear. Because tandem gear is so different, no amount of previous experience has really prepared you for using it. The addition of the drogue and the optional student drogue release handle greatly increases the number of malfunctions you may have to deal with. On normal solo gear, a flowchart of possible malfunctions and their solutions is fairly straightforward and compact. The similar chart for tandem rig is monstrously complicated by comparison. Add to this the higher speeds tandem produces during certain malfunctions, and you will appreciate why a thorough understanding of how the tandem vector functions and malfunctions is so important. The purpose of your second tandem jump is to show you what it is like to be a tandem student, so that you will be better able to prepare your future students for their first tandem jump. Jumps 3, 4, and 5 allow you to act as a tandem instructor, with experienced jumpers or other tandem instructors acting as your student. Before you go on to this stage, you must be fully comfortable with the gear and completely ready to handle any malfunction so that you can concentrate on handling the additional complication of a passenger. After your first few tandem jumps, you might get the impression that tandem is easy, which is basically true if you are well prepared and if you approach tandem with the right mental attitude. But let me warn you now, lack of preparation or currency combined with a careless attitude can spell instant disaster, because when things go wrong in tandem, they go wrong very quickly. A careful analysis of tandem accidents shows that most of them start on the ground with decisions made by the tandem instructor before boarding the aircraft. In other words, poor judgment is a tandem instructor's worst enemy. Does this course teach you judgment? No, of course not. It only demonstrates how the tandem vector works and sets forth a few simple rules about how to use it safely. Good judgment is something I hope you already possess. This course also does not teach you how to instruct. That is why you must already be an instructor or have taken a Fundamentals of Instruction course before entering. I urge you to study the material found in the Tandem Vector Instructor's Handbook until you know it forwards and backwards. Your responsibility as a tandem instructor is perhaps greater than any other kind of parachute instructor, because the lives of not just one, but 2 people are in your hands. Tandem is not just another jump.
At first glance, the tandem system looks like an overgrown sport rig, but it's not. The tandem rig differs from a solo rig in the number and complexity of systems it contains, the location of the handles used in normal operation, and especially the emergency procedures. The student harness is highly adjustable and incorporates 4 hookup points, 2 snaps with locking pins at the shoulders, and 2 adjustable quick ejectors at the hips. The Tandem Master harness is also adjustable and incorporates integral student attachment points as part of the main lift web and large harness ring assembly. The reserve ripcord is mounted outboard of the left main lift web. Will have either a pillow or loop webbing handle and is pulled with the left hand. The main canopy release is a soft pillow handle located outboard of the right main lift web and is activated with the right hand. Both handles are color-coded to aid in visual identification, green for go and red for stop. These handles are mounted outboard to make them easily accessible, and they're double velcroed in place to prevent them from being accidentally dislodged. This extra secure mounting makes these handles hard to pull in certain directions. You must first pull the handle out and up to peel the Velcro, then pull down to activate the particular system. Extensive ground practice is recommended to prevent surprises during an actual emergency. Our reserve static line shackle is located directly inboard of the right 3-ring assembly. The ball handle is used for reserve activation in the event the left hand becomes incapacitated during the jump. Pulling the ball straight upward will release the shackle, peel the Velcro, and activate the reserve. For non-emergency static line disconnection, such as imminent high wind landings, pull the ring, not the ball. Pulling the ball too often will stretch the ring and render the shackle inoperative. The drogue bridle, drogue riser, and drogue release are contained in this pouch on the main container bottom flap. Drogue deployment is achieved by pulling the orange plastic handle, which is attached to the top of the drogue canopy. Primary drogue release handle is on the bottom left-hand side of the container. Pulling the orange plastic handle all the way out will release the drogue and begin deployment of the main canopy. An auxiliary right-hand drogue release is available as an option and may be attached to either the Tandem Master or student harness. The application of this handle will be covered in other sections of this video. Let's look at the operational sequence of events during a normal tandem jump. After exiting the aircraft and achieving stability, the Tandem Master deploys the drogue. The inflated drogue limits tandem terminal velocity to that of a single jumper. Upon reaching the desired opening altitude, the drogue release is pulled setting into motion a rapid sequence of events. With the outer Kevlar bridle released, the container closing pin is pulled, allowing the deployment bag to lift off. At the same time, the tension on the inner tubular centerline collapses the drogue to reduce bag liftoff forces and lessen the chance of line dump or bag strip. The partially collapsed drogue now functions as a pilot chute and pulls your canopy to line stretch in about half a second. Let's summarize the information in this section. The Tandem Vector has more systems than a solo sport rig and consequently more handles to activate those systems. These handles are not in the usual places. Main parachute deployment is more complicated than a solo rig, and as a result, the emergency procedures are very complex.
Tandem jumping requires extra discipline and awareness. Remember that the next time you strap a tandem rig on your back.
Consider the abuse a drogue takes on every jump. A 4-foot drogue is thrown out with 400 pounds in tow and expected to perform flawlessly for hundreds of jumps. On each skydive, it buffets violently as it's dragged through the air at 120 miles per hour. Some owners have gotten well over 500 jumps on a single drogue without much repair. However, because of the abuse the drogue and bridle takes, it will eventually wear out. The drogue assembly, and particularly the tubular nylon inner bridle, should be inspected before every jump. The best time to do this is just before packing. There are 3 particular spots that have proven vulnerable to excessive wear: at the bottom, middle, and top of the assembly. These areas must be checked before every jump. At the bottom, the loop which connects the drogue bridle to the main canopy can fray as a result of being squeezed between the ring at the top of the canopy and the ring at the top of the bag during bag liftoff. The wear at this point is caused by abrasion, so the white tubular will fray considerably before failing. If you find any damage here, it's time to replace the white tubular section of the drogue bridle assembly. Another particular wear point is at the center of the inner white tubular bridle between 6 and 9 feet from the container closing pin. As the drogue is released, the yellow Kevlar outer bridle is scrunched up, resulting in friction burns where it comes to rest on the white tubular. The effects are concentrated on this 3-foot span of the white tubular bridle. The white tubular will not fray before failing. However, there are definite signs that the bridle is weakened and should be replaced. As the white tubular wears, it changes color from white to tan. All of the tubular will become dirty with use. However, the shade of dingy tan resulting from wear is not the same as dirt. When serious wear takes place, the yellow color code threads running down the middle of the tubular start to blend in with the background and become faint and indistinct. An additional sign of wear is a change in the texture of the outer nylon surface. Normal white tubular, even if it is dirty, will feel smooth. Tubular that is worn will feel fuzzy to the touch. If you run your fingers over the whole length of the white tubular, you'll be able to feel the change in texture from smooth to fuzzy as you hit a worn spot. Check this critical area before the drogue is set. The third place to check for wear is the point where the white tubular bridle loops through the drogue deployment handle on the top of the drogue canopy. The wear in this area occurs far more quickly if your drogue has 900-pound Dacron line as the handle attachment instead of the 9/16 white tubular. Other possible wear points to check are the stop ring at the bottom of the drogue, all Kevlar attachment points, and the cotton buffer on the yellow Kevlar bridle just above the large attachment ring. The proper functioning of the drogue is critical for proper main parachute deployment. The consequences of drogue failure can be as minor as a hard opening or as major as a main reserve entanglement. Continual inspection of the drogue and bridle assembly and replacement or repair when necessary will prevent such occurrences. Because of the large size of the drogue, the forces on the bag at deployment time can be enough to cause line dump. That is, all the lines become unstowed at once. Line dump can cause a malfunction, especially if the locking stows release prematurely. Using the correct stow bands for the suspension lines on your canopy will help eliminate line dump. For 700-pound Dacron, use tandem rubber bands which are wider and stronger than regular rubber bands, or use tandem tube stows. If you run out of the correct stow bands, it is possible to use 2 regular rubber bands, but you must observe special cautions. Refer to the Tandem Instructor Manual for stow band selection criteria. For microline, use the special Tandem microline tube stows. If you run out of these, it is possible to use 1 standard non-tandem rubber band wrapped twice around each line stow. Again, refer to the Tandem Instructor Manual for special cautions. To produce a stronger flare for softer landings, the Relative Workshop double brake system provides an extra set of lines on the tail of the tandem canopy. The outer set of lines with the long gold toggles are the primary steering lines. The inner lines with the short black toggles are used along with the normal steering lines only for landing. To set the brakes, pull down all of the toggles until the junction of the loops is at the large guide ring. Thread the riser loop through the deployment brake loop on the primary steering lines, then the secondary steering lines. Now feed the riser loop up through the guide ring and lock it in place with the large gold toggle. Starting first with the snap at the top, attach the gold toggle to the black Velcro on the riser. Then pull the secondary steering line until the toggle is tight against its guide ring and mate the Velcro. Notice that the small toggle line does not go through the main steering line guide ring, but is pushed to the side behind the ring. Now S-fold the primary and secondary steering lines on either side of the riser and close the cover. The information presented here is an addendum only. Refer to the Tandem Vector Manual and packing video for complete packing instructions. The correct treatment of the nose of the tandem canopy will help ensure an orderly deployment. With the canopy flaked neatly on its side, count off the top 5 cells and fold them back. Take the bottom 4 cells and roll them in toward the center. Pull the middle cell out to the side. Then take the top 4 cells and roll them in toward the center. At this point, ensure that all the A-line attach points line up. Tuck the center cell in between the 2 canopy halves. With both sides rolled to the middle and the center cell left loose, the canopy can open from the middle out, producing a more symmetrical deployment. Complete the rest of your pack job as usual. For the sake of clarity, this video shows the drogue being hooked up after it has been set. Refer to the Tandem Vector packing instructions for the complete packing sequence. Prior to hooking up the drogue, check that the yellow cable for the primary drogue release is threaded through both tape channels, the one on the bottom container flap and the one on the drogue riser. To hook up the drogue on a tandem rig with a single release handle, attach the large ring on the Kevlar drogue bridle to the remaining 2 rings on the drogue riser. Use the white loop and yellow release cable to lock the drogue in place. The drogue release hooks up the same way as a 3-ring riser release. Insert the end of the release cable into the slot in the Kevlar bridle, which holds the tubular nylon. The slot in the Kevlar bridle near the big ring should face the rig so that the tubular nylon bridle doesn't wrap around anything. If the rig is equipped with the optional right-hand drogue release handle, then the drogue riser will be slightly different. There will now be 2 cables running up through the same channel on the back of the drogue riser. Notice that the closing loop on the double drogue release system has 2 open ends and is not permanently attached to the riser. Every time you pack, prior to hooking up the drogue, check the tacking on the container end of the secondary housing for security. An unsecured housing could cause a premature drogue release. Again, the slot in the Kevlar bridle near the big ring should face the rig as you hook up the Kevlar drogue bridle. One end of the closing loop goes through the top grommet and is secured with 1 cable. The other end locks the ring in place and then goes through the bottom grommet and is secured with the other cable. It doesn't matter which end of the loop goes with which cable. Ensure that each cable goes through only one end of the loop. If both cables go through all of the locking loops, it will be necessary to pull both drogue release handles to release the drogue. Both release cables do go through the red riser loop at the top of the drogue riser, which prevents the loss of the closing loop after drogue release. And both of the release cables go into the same slot in the Kevlar bridle, which holds the tubular nylon. The Relative Workshop does not endorse a specific training protocol regarding the use of the secondary drogue release handle for student training. The scope of this video and the manual covers only its function and possible malfunctions. The secondary handle can be attached to the main lift web of the student harness below the chest strap, or it can be left on the Tandem Instructor's harness. To attach the handle to the student harness, first hook up the right side snap to the Tandem Instructor's harness. Next, route the housing under the main lift web of the Tandem rig and attach the handle to the student harness with the snaps toward the rear of the main lift web. Complete the student hookup by attaching the left side connector, followed by both top snaps and locking pins. By hooking up the right side snap before the handle, you greatly reduce the chance of undue stress on the housing and handle assembly. To check for proper attachment, verify that the domed side of the snaps are just under the handle on the outside. The release handle will lay on top of the main lift web. If you prefer the student does not have access to the drogue release, the secondary handle can be attached to the Tandem Instructor's harness, either on the main lift web, the chest strap, or the upper leg strap. There are 2 points to consider when positioning the secondary release handle. First, install the handle so it's easy to reach. And second, control the excess housing to eliminate the possibility of entanglement with the drogue or any part of the aircraft. To attach the handle to the main lift web, route the housing under the main lift web, then in a gentle S-curve behind the student and under the chest strap. If the handle is already in place when you don the rig, check to make sure that the housing is under the chest strap. After each jump, the Tandem Instructor should attach the housing and handle to the right main lift web of his rig just below the D-ring and above the cutaway handle. This is very important. If the handle was to be inadvertently left loose, it could cause a malfunction of the drogue, the main, or the reserve. It's highly recommended that the Tandem Instructor operate the secondary drogue release handle on every other jump so that the handle location and its use become second nature. To facilitate student use, the secondary drogue release handle should be positioned for easy access in a similar location as your normal solo student systems.
In the following section, we'll go into detail on the ground preparation necessary before a typical tandem jump. Before we do, though, there's one thing I'd like to talk about, and that's the size ratio between the novice tandem master and the student. During most of this activity, You and the student are hooked tightly together. During that time, especially in and around the aircraft, you'll have to function as one person. Basic common sense dictates that the novice tandem master should be equal to or larger than the student in size and strength. For the exit, during the free fall, and definitely for the landing, you may have to physically handle the passenger. For this reason, a student that's larger than the novice tandem master can be a safety hazard. As you gain more experience, passenger size and weight limits can increase. Okay, let's go meet our student and see what we have to do on the ground before we make a tandem jump. Hi, my name is TK, and I'll be the tandem master taking you up in your first jump. But before I begin the briefing that you'll need before we make that jump, I have a short video I want to show you. You'll see a complete tandem jump and then an explanation of the assumption of risk agreement you'd need to sign before the jump. Make yourself comfortable while I start the video. Every student must see the video and sign the assumption of risk agreement. If the video machine isn't working or the tape is lost, it's the same as if the aircraft is inoperative. No one may make a tandem jump without seeing the video and signing the assumption of risk agreement. Now that you've seen the video, I'll need you to read and sign the assumption of risk agreement. Initial the paragraphs where indicated and then sign at the bottom. It's a good idea to pre-adjust the harness before putting it on the student. If the passenger is small, then the adjustment points need to be as short as possible. If the person is large, then loosen the adjustments accordingly. Okay, finished with the paperwork? Looks complete. Very good. Okay, Christine, this is the harness that you'll be wearing during your skydive. Notice it has 4 snaps, 2 at the top and 2 at the sides. These will attach to my parachute system. Why don't you stand up, and I'll put you into the harness. Left leg first, and then the right. Very good, arms in here. Now I've already pre-adjusted this harness to fit you a little bit better, so I don't have to spend all day adjusting it. This is the chest strap. And I'm going to leave this loose for the time being. It won't be snug too far down. We've got main lift web adjusters here. They need to be a little bit shorter. Snug these leg pads down just a little bit. You've noticed that this harness has a lot of adjustments on it by now. But they're all very important, so we don't want you falling out of it. Turn around. We'll get the back diagonals. Snug them up a bit. Okay, turn around once again. And we'll want to adjust these leg pads a little bit better, because we don't want your legs falling asleep under canopy. Tuck the dead ends in so they're not in the way. Okay. And how does that harness feel?
This harness seems a little loose.
When you sit down, the harness, and especially the chest strap, may seem very loose. When we hook up for the jump, the harness will tighten up and it'll be just right. Now I'm going to teach you the proper body position for the exit. First, arch your back, pushing your hips and stomach forward, and keep your head all the way back. Now put your thumbs in behind the webbing, here, and hold on. Okay, Christine, lay down here, and let's practice it the way it'll be in the air. Your feet should be together, yeah, and your knees as close as possible, and shorten your legs. Keep your head up and eyes on the horizon. Very good. Feel this arch here between your shoulders and knees. That's what helps keep us stable during the free fall. Very good. Okay, you can get up now. There's one very important thing I want to mention at this time. Never ever grab my arms or hands at any time during the jump. I must have complete freedom of my arms to operate the parachute system. If my arms aren't free and I can't reach the operating handles when I need to, we'll both die. Okay, let's go to the aircraft mock-up and we'll practice our hookup and exit procedures. Now we're going to go through the hookup and exit procedures. We're close to our exit altitude, so let's begin the hookup. Now look over your right shoulder and watch as I hook up the right snap and insert the safety pin. Okay. Now watch as I hook up the left snap and insert the safety pin. The next attachment is the side snaps. And you can pull on these to make sure that I've hooked them up. All right. And now let's take the dead ends and tighten them down, the right side, the left, the right side, the left. Okay, good. Make sure that they're symmetrical, and then I'll tuck them in. Before exit, I'm going to perform a final equipment check. Starting with your harness, I'll check the top snaps and safety pins, the side snaps, your leg hardware, and the dead ends, and the chest strap. On my rig, I'll check the handle placement, check the drogue release, the cutaway, the reserve, and the reserve lanyard. The airplane's at exit altitude. Let's check our helmet and goggles that everything's in place. The pilot has just opened the door. Let's move a little bit closer to the right side here. Put your hands on your harness like I showed you before. Very good. And with the right foot, let's begin the climb out all the way out into the step. There we go. Pivot around a little bit, and we're ready to do the exit together. Here we go. Assume that free fall body position, head high. Feet and knees together and bent. Very good. I'll deploy the drogue. When I tap you on the head, I want you to bring your arms out. Then just relax and enjoy the sensation of the skydive. When we reach opening altitude, I'll pull the drogue release, which starts the main canopy opening sequence, and the opening is quite gentle. I want you to maintain your body position until the canopy opens and pulls us upright, and we're suspended in the harness. First, I'll check the canopy and make sure it's okay. Then I'll hand you the toggles. I'll show you how to steer the canopy, and we'll do 3 or 4 practice landing flares. When we get close to the ground, I'll tell you to prepare to land. Put your legs out in front of you, and I need to see them, and that'll prevent you from stumbling when we land. You'll need good leg tension with your knees slightly bent so you can support your weight when we touch down. Let's unhook and we'll take your harness off so we can practice a few landings. Okay, let me help you off with the harness. And now I'd like you to sit up on the edge of this table here, and I'd show you what it's like to land a parachute. Now I'd like you to push off, take a step forward, and support your own weight when you land. With the amount of wind we have today, that landing pretty much simulates the type of landing we're going to have. What do you say we get the rest of our equipment, go to the aircraft, and get ready to skydive? Well, let's finish gearing up and then we'll go skydive. Christine, I'd like you to put on this suit for me, please. When you're fitting your passenger with a suit, stay on the tight side. You'll have more control over your passengers when all their residual drag is eliminated. Your job becomes easier when you can turn your passenger into a heavy, compact mass, producing as little drag as possible. If your passenger shows up at the drop zone wearing sport clothes that are free fall compatible, by all means jump them without a suit. And don't forget to have them leave their jewelry on the ground. Okay, it's time to get you back into this harness again. Put your right foot here, And your left foot here. And put both arms through the harness. Let's do up your chest strap. And we'll take some of the slack out of these leg straps. Before you go too far with the harness adjustment, position the top hooks an inch or two behind the center line of the shoulder. For this size passenger, this is an ideal placement of the hooks. If the hooks are positioned too close to the center line, the main lift web will put unnecessary pressure on the chest and shoulder areas, which can cause substantial decrease of blood flow to the head. We've seen and heard of passengers that have passed out under canopy, and this is one of the reasons for it. Let's take a moment and consider another situation. If your passenger is as big as this guy, then position the hooks farther back from the center line of the shoulder. When you have to jump with guys this size, you'll probably have to move the hooks 4 inches or more behind the center line. The larger the chest cavity, the farther back the hooks should be. I don't recommend jumping with a guy this size right off the bat. Gradually increase the size of your passenger, commensurate with your experience, skill, and confidence level. Remember the size of your biggest passenger and only increase that weight about 15 pounds at a time. Work your way up slowly. The larger passengers are best jumped in higher ground winds, so the descent and forward speed of the approach will be slower and more manageable. Christine, I'd like you to try on this helmet and see if it fits. The Relative Workshop recommends the use of leather helmets for both the passenger and the tandem instructor. We do not recommend using a hard helmet for the passenger. The possibility of the tandem instructor being struck by the back of the passenger's helmet is just too great. And here are a pair of goggles for you. One note about goggles that's worth remembering is that passengers never tighten their goggles enough. This is particularly important if they're wearing contact lenses. So I suggest, prior to every jump, double check the goggles yourself. I like to wear a suit with a bit of wing and extra material at the lower arms and legs. This type of suit will generally give the inexperienced tandem master more control during the exit and initial free fall. It'll also help eliminate the rocking action in drogue fall. When you get some experience behind you, it's possible to wear a tighter suit, or in really hot days, not wear a suit at all. As you gain more experience and confidence, you'll find that stability just happens as a matter of course, and you won't really have to rely on a large suit to create that stability for you. Before putting on the tandem vector, perform a thorough gear check covering the following points. Open the back of the drogue pouch and be sure that the 3-ring drogue bridle attachment is correctly secured. If you have the auxiliary drogue release handle installed, one cable should pass through one end of the white loop and the other cable through the other loop end, and both cables through the red loop. Open the main pin flap and follow the white drogue inner bridle from the ring assembly directly to the pin. Be sure the pin is seated correctly. Check to see that the drogue deployment and drogue release handles are in their proper positions. If the secondary right-hand drogue release handle is installed, be sure it is properly attached to the right main lift web of the Tandem Master's harness. Do not leave it dangling. Open the reserve flap and make sure the pin is properly seated. Do not push the reserve pin too far into the loop. This will cause it to twist, making the bottom of the pin stick up instead of lying flat. Inspect the reserve static line lanyard for proper routing through the guide ring. Be sure the Velcro is mated properly over the shoulder. Check the snap shackle for proper attachment, and be sure the yellow Velcro strip is attached to the back side of the 1-inch square weave lanyard to properly position the ball handle. Check the 3-ring releases, left and right, for proper assembly, condition of the loop, and be sure the cable secures the loop behind the grommet of the cable housing. Check security of the breakaway and reserve handles. Check the main lift webs, right and left, for symmetry and proper length. The rig is now ready to jump. Okay, let's go.
There are two types of tandem exits, poised and diving. Each has advantages and disadvantages. The decision of which exit to use on any jump rests with the tandem master. In the poised exit, the student assumes the freefall body position before exiting, and the tandem pair leave the aircraft head high and facing into the relative wind. With the student already in the proper body position before leaving the aircraft, the exit will almost surely be stable. Since stability is exceptionally important for all tandem jumps, it's recommended that beginning tandem masters use the poised exit on every dive. The main disadvantage in the poised exit is that the climb-out requires time and effort. In a Cessna with a large student, the climb-out is very difficult. This exit requires a large door or a step and strut. There are some aircraft from which a poised exit is nearly impossible. In the diving exit, the tandem pair exits head low toward the tail of the aircraft. The student must change into the freefall body position immediately after exit. The main advantage of the diving exit is the elimination of some or all of the climb-out. Most experienced tandem masters use a diving exit from a Cessna every time, and out of other aircraft sometimes, depending on the specifics of the dive. The diving exit can be done out of virtually any aircraft that is suitable for skydiving. In fact, for some aircraft, the diving exit may be the only possibility. The big disadvantage of a diving exit is the possibility of instability. The last thing that should happen to a first-time tandem student is to be presented with an earth-sky tumble right after exit. Exit stability is created by the tandem master, and the importance of a stable exit on every tandem jump can't be overemphasized. Using the drogue to gain stability will not be tolerated. Let's take a look at the factors affecting exit stability and then look at exits from several typical aircraft. A large jumpsuit for the tandem master and a small one for the student will give the tandem master maximum control. Proper tandem master body position is the #1 priority on exit. If the tandem master's arch is good, with proper presentation to the relative wind, and the student's arms are in, then the tandem pair will become stable. Of course, if the student has correct body position, the tandem pair will achieve stability much faster. A few extra minutes practicing the correct body position on the ground will make a big difference in the air when the student may be a bit overloaded. Emphasize head back, body arched, feet tucked up and crossed, elbows back with the hands grasping the main lift web. Make sure the student understands the importance of keeping the arms in on the exit. Looking at specific aircraft, the Cessna type with step and strut is probably the most common. Here, a poised exit works the best since you depart the airplane in a stable position. Although the launch is easy, the climb out with a large passenger can be difficult. In this case, if the tandem master can handle it, a diving exit works best. If the aircraft is a DC-3 or Twin Otter, both of which have large doors, a poised or diving exit is appropriate. The poised exit, however, will be the cleanest and most stable. In an aircraft with a small door, no strut, and no step, the diving exit will work the best. Perform this exit from a kneeling position or sitting with the legs outside the door. Backing out of a small door aircraft is not recommended. Passenger interference could cause an accidental container opening. The longer you remain in or around the door of an aircraft, the higher the chance of a serious accident. A tailgate exit can be either diving or poised. The poised exit is particularly easy and gives the student a great view of the airplane. When deciding on an exit, the comfort and enjoyment of the student should be your first consideration. The poised exit, with its head-high, stable launch, and good view of the airplane, is recommended whenever possible. Freefall is the part of the skydive between the exit and drogue fall. The purpose of freefall is to achieve the stability required for safe drogue deployment. Using correct exit techniques and freefall body position, gaining and maintaining stability without the drogue is easy. In fact, the Tandem Vector was originally designed for use without a drogue. The Relative Workshop amassed in excess of 10,000 tandem jumps without a drogue, and thousands of these were to terminal velocity. No other tandem system has accumulated anywhere near this much freefall experience. This development process produced canopies which can withstand tandem terminal without structural damage or hard openings. This fact becomes critically important when you realize that your reserve has no drogue to protect it from tandem terminal. As a matter of fact, several of our operators have used the Tandem Vector without a drogue since the beginning of tandem development. The optimum time for drogue deployment is 3 to 5 seconds after leaving the aircraft, when you are stable and face to earth. Above all else, do not use the drogue to gain stability. If, however, stability has not been established within 10 to 15 seconds after exit or passing 5,000 feet, deploy the drogue as a last resort. This is a much better alternative than pulling the reserve while unstable at 170 miles per hour. Before discussing the procedures for using the drogue, let's quickly review its functions. The only purpose of the drogue is to reduce tandem freefall velocity. When fully inflated, it provides enough drag to give a tandem pair the terminal velocity of an average solo jumper. During main canopy deployment, the drogue is partially collapsed to prevent excessive loads at bag liftoff. This drogue configuration will deploy the main canopy in a normal manner. The tandem drogue is considerably larger than a typical hand-deploy pilot chute, and consequently it requires significantly more effort to deploy. Before your first jump, gear up and practice drogue deployment on the ground. Take a firm grip on the handle with your palm facing forward and thumb out. Be careful not to put your fingers into the handle. The force required to extract the drogue can be substantial, especially when the pouch is new, so grip and pull firmly. If necessary, place your elbow against the side of the rig and use this leverage to assist extraction from the pouch. During deployment, rotate your arm and immediately let go when your hand is just above the height of your shoulder. Never hold on to the drogue. Extract and throw it in one smooth motion. Turn your head enough to watch the drogue inflate. Full inflation takes 3 seconds or so. The drogue deployment and drogue release handles are not readily visible to the tandem master. Because they can be inadvertently dislodged, use this checklist on every jump. Check the security of all the handles. Move to the exit position. Exit and gain stability. Deploy the drogue and watch it inflate. Reach back and touch the drogue release handle. Touch the reserve ripcord handle. These exercises will develop the handle awareness necessary for safe tandem jumps. Once the drogue is deployed, you can tap the student's shoulder and tell him it's time to put his arms out. The drag created by the drogue tends to place your body in a fixed attitude in free fall. If you try to change your pitch attitude too much, the interaction of body momentum and drogue forces will produce a rocking motion. Rocking can also be caused by bad student body position, too small a jumpsuit on the Tandem Instructor, and loose hip straps. If you relax and don't try to move your arms and legs to compensate for the rocking, it will cease. The drogue may be released at any time during drogue fall. To release the drogue and deploy the main canopy, simply pull the orange drogue release handle all the way out. When you pull the drogue release handle, you will feel an immediate trapdoor effect. The now partially collapsed drogue acts as a pilot chute and pulls your canopy to line stretch in about half a second. The canopy will streamer for a second or two and then open slowly. If you pull the release handle completely and do not feel the sensation, your drogue has probably failed to release. This is a critical moment for the tandem master. Maintain altitude awareness and, if necessary, exercise emergency procedures immediately. Tandem canopy openings are generally quite comfortable and smooth. The opening can be described as a slight streamer while the slider remains high and the airspeed of the tandem pair reduces for several seconds. At that time, the slider quickly descends and the canopy opens to about 90% of its normal size. The end cells are normally open, with the slider almost completely down to the links. After opening, some tandem main canopies rock in and out of a stall. If this happens, release the brakes immediately. Watch the opening and check the canopy while releasing the brakes using the student steering toggles. Pump down the slider and tell the student to check the canopy. The tandem instructor is checking the sky for other canopies at this time. Hand the student the steering toggles while saying, "Grab the toggles the same way I have." Stow away the drogue release handle. Check the breakaway and reserve handles, as well as the security of the 3-ring release cables at the riser. Check the reserve static line. On the student's harness, check the top main snaps and feel around front for the chest strap. If it's too tight, loosen it a bit. Release the side quick ejectors, loosen the webbing, and reattach the snaps. The Relative Workshop highly recommends that the side snaps remain attached to the tandem master's harness the entire jump. Have your student slide the leg pads forward under the back of the thighs to get more comfortable. Tell the student you will now instruct him in basic canopy control. First, teach full flight. Remind the student not to hang on the toggles. The hands should be all the way up, with no tension on the steering lines. When teaching turns, have the student look in the direction of the intended turn to check for other canopies. Then pick out a ground reference for heading control and proceed with the turn. Show turns in both directions. Next, have your student pull down on both toggles from the full flight position. Tell him to listen for the change in wind noise as brakes are applied. Mention that the canopy will slow down a lot, and that's why braking is done for landing. Ground reference instruction will teach the student to navigate the canopy from the opening point to the target. Point out the drop zone and windsock. Explain the spot, target, and wind line. Turn downwind and point out the target as you describe running. Turn back into the wind and define holding. Then turn crosswind and explain crabbing. Tell your passenger that you will now practice 3 or 4 landings and remind him of the leg and hand positions that were taught on the ground. Say, hands up, feet up, and flare. Guide the student's hand movement to control the speed of the flare. Repeat the practice until your student is doing the flare with you and not fighting your movement on the toggles. There are 3 types of tandem landings. A variety of factors will influence your decision of which one to use. When the wind is over 10 miles per hour, a proper flare should yield a no forward speed stand-up landing. All a student has to do is keep enough leg tension to support his or her own weight. When the wind is high, have a canopy catcher waiting for you at the landing area. Hand one toggle to the catcher at touchdown and have him run into the wind to collapse the canopy. Tell the student beforehand to let go of the toggle immediately after touchdown so the catcher can do his job. If the wind is more than 5 but less than 10 miles per hour, both tandem master and student must take a few steps after touchdown. The running landing is actually the most difficult and takes considerable student preparation. Without proper leg tension, The student will probably fall down with the tandem instructor on top. If you doubt the student's ability to make a running landing, perform a sliding landing instead. When the wind is less than 5 miles per hour, the day is hot, the student heavy, or the field elevation high, a sliding landing is probably the best choice. Prepare for a sliding landing by telling the student to raise his feet and knees in a bent leg position just a moment before the flare. Level the canopy out to 0 rate of descent and sit back slightly, causing the student to do the same. First, your heels, then your butt will slide across the ground as the flare is completed, and you'll end up in a sitting position with the student on your lap. If at the last moment the ground winds allow for a stand-up landing, simply inform the student to either stand up or run just as you're flaring the canopy.
In this module, we'll talk about and look at possible emergency situations you may encounter as a tandem instructor. The course of action in an aircraft emergency depends on the altitude and the condition of the aircraft. There are so many different scenarios to consider, we can't possibly cover all of them here. However, we can make some general statements. In the event of a catastrophic airframe failure or fire which is life-threatening, exit the aircraft with the student if possible. Some chance of survival is better than none at all. Keep in mind that if the student isn't hooked up and you're running out of time, just one top snap will handle the load. To make a safe exit without the side snaps attached, wrap your legs tightly around the student on exit and don't release them until either the main or reserve canopy is open. Below 1,500 feet, if the aircraft is stable and gliding, then stay with the aircraft.
After an emergency exit between 1,500 feet and 4,000 feet, deploy the reserve. Above 4,000 feet, deploy the drogue and pull the drogue release handle at the appropriate altitude.
The next section is on student interference, and I can't emphasize this enough. Keep your arms away from the student at all times. In particular, never put your wrist-mounted altimeter in front of the student's face. If you review the tandem fatality reports, you'll see that this is an engraved invitation to the student to grab your arm. If somehow a student does grab an arm and is holding on tight, do not reach in with the other arm to try and free it. Shout at the student to release your arm. If he doesn't, and he has the right arm, simply use the left hand to release the drogue. If you cannot free your left arm, use your right hand to pull the ball handle on the reserve static line lanyard for immediate reserve deployment. If you have a secondary right-hand drogue release ripcord installed in your tandem system and a student has your left arm, simply pull the drogue release with your right hand. If the secondary drogue release handle is mounted up on the student harness, then be careful about reaching for it. Generally speaking, it would be best to reach under the arm for the ripcord as opposed to over the arm. Inform your student to never grab your arms during the jump. If you don't have complete freedom to operate the parachute system, then you and your passenger will probably die an ugly death by sudden impact trauma. Make sure these consequences are clearly understood by your passenger. The rest of the emergency procedures we'll discuss here deal with equipment problems. If you pull the drogue release handle before deploying the drogue, deploy the drogue immediately. Since pulling the release handle collapses the drogue, main canopy deployment will come slower than normal when the drogue's finally thrown. If you do not deploy the drogue promptly, you will of course continue to accelerate towards 170 miles per hour. Therefore, the longer you wait, the higher your velocity will be when the main deploys. If you're unable to locate the drogue deployment handle or are unable to extract the drogue completely from its pouch, you have a total malfunction. Pull the reserve ripcord immediately before your velocity builds up. The longer you wait, the greater the reserve opening shock. This malfunction can be avoided by packing the drogue correctly and by practicing deployment on the ground. If the drogue is deployed but partially or completely uninflated, It will have enough drag to deploy the main canopy, although it will take longer than normal to do so. If the drogue does not inflate within 6 to 8 seconds after deployment, pull the drogue release handle to deploy the main canopy. If you wait longer, your velocity will increase and, of course, produce a higher opening shock. If the drogue canopy becomes entangled with you, your passenger, or your gear and does not inflate, your velocity will increase to 170 miles per hour in about 18 seconds. The longer you wait to deploy the reserve, the higher the reserve opening shock will be. Therefore, we recommend that a tandem master spend only a few seconds trying to clear the entangled drogue canopy before pulling the reserve ripcord. If the drogue bridle becomes entangled with the jumper or the gear and the drogue is fully inflated, velocity probably will not exceed 120 miles per hour. This will give you additional time to analyze and correct the problem. The force of the inflated drogue may or may not clear the entanglement. If you suspect that the drogue bridle is entangled with either you, your passenger, or your gear, do not pull the drogue release handle. Doing so would lift the main off your back and probably result in a horseshoe malfunction. Instead, pull the reserve ripcord. Launching the reserve pilot chute into a trailing drogue is much better than into a horseshoe malfunction. If the primary drogue release handle is pulled, but the main does not deploy, you'll have a drogue in tow situation. For the complete release of the drogue to occur, two things must happen. First of all, the three-ring must release the Kevlar outer bridle when the drogue release handle is pulled. And second, the tubular inner bridle must in turn pull the container locking pin out, open the container, and lift the bag out. If step number one fails to occur, you will have an inflated drogue in tow. There will be no trapdoor effect after you pull the drogue release handle, and your velocity will remain at 120 miles per hour. If your rig is equipped with a secondary drogue release handle, pull it. Improper rigging of the white closing loop during drogue attachment may require activation of both handles to release the drogue. If the drogue is still in tow at 3,000 feet AGL, pull the reserve ripcord. If the three-ring releases but the bag doesn't leave the container, you probably have a collapsed drogue in tow. In this case, something, probably incorrect tubular bridle routing, has stopped the container closing pin from being pulled. You will feel the normal trapdoor effect when you pull the drogue release handle, but the main will not come out and you will continue accelerating towards 170 miles per hour. A collapsed drogue in tow is potentially more dangerous than an inflated drogue because the increased free-fall velocity gives you less time to pull your reserve and subjects your reserve canopy to a higher opening speed. With this in mind, the correct procedure is pull the reserve ripcord immediately. A collapsed drogue in tow can almost always be avoided by following the packing instructions correctly. Once the reserve is open and you're heading towards the landing area, reach back and reel in the trailing drogue if altitude permits. If the main canopy should begin to deploy, release it by pulling the breakaway handle. In the event the drogue becomes entangled with the opening main canopy, you may or may not have a problem. You must ask yourself two questions. Can I control the parachute? And can I land it safely without injury? If the answer is no to either question, a breakaway and reserve deployment is required. To break away from a malfunction, tell the student to assume the initial free fall position. Arms in, feet and knees together, and body arched. Scissor the student's legs between yours. Look at and grab the green breakaway handle. Look at the reserve handle and make sure it's where you think it is. Pull the breakaway handle while still looking at the reserve handle. Pull the reserve handle and never count on the reserve static line to open the reserve for you. A canopy transfer where the square reserve is deployed without first jettisoning the main is not recommended under normal circumstances, nor is it recommended with tandem equipment. The reserve pilot chute may not have enough drag to extract the reserve from its container. If it does, the resulting deployment is unpredictable. If you pull the drogue handle, but the drogue does not collapse, the main will open very hard. In this situation, determine if the main canopy has been damaged by the opening shock. If it has, decide whether it's controllable and safe to land. If the drogue is still attached and trailing behind the canopy, there is probably minimal damage to the top of the canopy. A fully inflated drogue is not a big deal, but it does add extra drag, which slows the forward speed of the canopy. If the drogue canopy detaches when the drogue release handle is pulled, the main may or may not deploy. This can happen when the inner white tubular bridle on the drogue assembly breaks. If the main does not deploy, pull the reserve. Reserve opening shock will almost surely cause the main to be released, and it may deploy fully. If this happens, as soon as the reserve is fully open, break away the main canopy. If the main container were to open while on the step of the aircraft, the tandem instructor should exit, deploy the drogue, and pull the drogue release handle immediately. If the main container were to open prematurely during drogue fall, pull the drogue release handle as soon as possible. Remember, operate the handles in the correct order. Familiarize yourself with each of these malfunction situations until you know the correct reaction to each situation without having to think about it. Because of the increased complexity of the equipment, the number of malfunction possibilities is many times greater than a solo jump. In addition, the higher the normal tandem freefall speed decreases the amount of time you have to deal with a potential problem. The time you spend on the ground reviewing this material just might make the critical difference in the air that could save your life and the life of your passenger.
Safe tandem relative work results from careful planning and compliance with strict guidelines. The experience level for relative work jumpers requires 500 relative work jumps, of which 100 must have been made within the past year. The only exception is in the event the person is either a current tandem instructor or a current AFF jump master. A cameraman must meet all of the above guidelines and, in addition, must have at least 100 camera jumps. During the dirt dive, conduct a thorough briefing covering the essential safety points.
After exit, remain clear of us till the drogue is deployed. Never pass directly over my head. Exercise extreme caution when docking. Approach slowly and carefully. I prefer you approach from the front. Never take a grip on my wrist or arms. Take only a grip on the student's arm. Anticipate the tandem opening higher than your normal break-off altitude. When I wave off at 5,500 feet, back away so you will not fall on my back as I drop below you on drogue release. Okay? Let's go skydiving.
If the tandem vector is equipped with the new right-hand drogue release handle and it is accessible to the student, then all relative work is positively prohibited. If a photographer is accompanying a tandem pair under these same circumstances, then the exit must be planned so that he's never over the tandem pair. Students have been known to pull the handle immediately upon exit, meaning the main canopy will open as soon as the tandem master deploys the drogue. Tandem relative work can be done safely if approached with care. Follow the guidelines in this section. They are not optional.